Hi guys, and welcome to my Sonic 1 review. Without any further ado, let's dive into this review. So, the Sonic franchise has still been going for a very long time now. And despite some bad reputation the franchise has been getting over the years, it has still somehow managed to survive through all of its reputation. I'm someone who has nearly been a Sonic fan for nearly my entire life. And I want to find an answer to the question, does Sonic deserve the hate that he gets? Or is it all an exaggeration? At least an answer in my book. So, I plan on doing this by making a Sonic marathon reviewing all Sonic games from the main series. I may review certain spin-offs, but as of now, my focus is to review the games from the main series of which are canon. I may also note that while games like 06 are not canon, it was intended to be a reboot of the franchise, so even though games like 06 may not be canon, I will still have a major goal to review that game and truly judge it for what it is as fair as possible. And that applies to all Sonic games in general, of which I'm going to review. My main goal is to analyze all Sonic games and judge them all as individuals, only comparing if required to prove a point, or if it's a sequel to another game. But besides that, regardless of the game's reputation, I will try to look as open-minded into these games as possible. And naturally, I review the first game of which started it all, Sonic the Hedgehog, released in 1991 on the Sega Genesis. So, let's dive into this game by first looking at the development story behind it. We are in the 1990s. Nintendo has about 90% control over the gaming industry. Sega is kind of struggling to rival against a major company like Nintendo. They are trying to figure out a mascot of which could potentially rival Nintendo's mascot Super Mario, of which is also Nintendo's major selling point. They tried to come up with something. One of Sonic's original concepts was that he was supposed to be in this rock band with other animal friends that looks a lot like what would later become Team Chaotix in the Sonic universe. He was also going to have a human girlfriend, which I'm glad he did not go with, as a hedgehog and a human does not work out that well, and anyone with common sense would know that. Another original concept for Sonic was that Sonic was even supposed to be a rabbit-like character, but it was scratched as it was not a cool enough concept to rival someone like Mario. They later went with hedgehogs, which are not cool either, you could argue, but with Sonic, when they drew him, they somehow, even though he was a hedgehog, managed to make him look cool. They gave Sonic a cool attitude, a cool personality. The reason as to why they did this is so that they could make Mario looks as much of a joke as possible, and so that Sonic could be the new selling point for Sega. And it did very well. Sonic's attitude of going fast, not having patience when he stands still, all complemented him to fame in the gaming industry. Kids and people in general started to be more attached to Sonic, because of his so much cooler attitude than what Mario's was. Sonic is a blue hedgehog who can run super fast, and that fast factor and his attitude is what made the game sell so damn well. And I'm glad that Sega went this route, to try to make a character as different from Mario as possible, and also at the same time a character of which could rival Mario in general. Sega Genesis's fast processing and fast frames really showed its amazing of technology during this time. Just seeing these fast frames and a moving character being able to go this fast in a game was very much mind-blowing back then. But don't get me wrong, Sega Genesis's processing, which was really well shown these fast-paced games of Sonic, are not the only things that make the Sonic games good. Otherwise, the franchise would have died out ages ago. It's a matter of how well they handle the gameplay itself, of which we will get to eventually. But first, let's talk about the game's plot. Dr. Robotnik captures innocent animals in a peaceful-like world, puts them into not robots, but their names being quote-unquote badniks, so they turn into bad guys. And now it's up to Sonic to help his friends get out of their robot-like form and save the world and make sure that Robotnik does not turn Sonic and his friends' land into robotic madness. Robotnik is like that crazy scientist of which prefers technology over nature, and that is the character behind him and his appeal as a villain to someone like Sonic. Robotnik is like that guy who represents us, human beings, ruining the nature, and Sonic is like that one animal who is trying to stop all the crazy madness and trying to put things back to normal. The story is very straightforward, which is normal for platformers, especially during a time like this, seeing as there was not any options, as much as I'm concerned, for having cutscenes or such to make it a more deeper story. Or at least it was not that normal. However, a platformer, especially a platformer like Sonic the Hedgehog, does not need that much of a deep story. It's straightforward and I like that. Something like Sonic does not need a too deep story. At the end of the day, it's a blue fast-running hedgehog who collects rings and runs fast as all hell. So how much of a story can you really ask for? Let's talk about the graphics in the game. The graphics looks really good for a game on the Sega Genesis. It looks bright, colorful, and very cartoony-like, of which is what they were going for. And I like that. Green Hill Zone gives that nice, green, calm theme. Marble Zone looks more mystical and ancient-like. All zones, textures, and graphics give so much atmosphere to the game because of how well it was handled. Now, about that music. The music is for the most part just okay. Tracks like Green Hill Zone, in my book, is really good, while zone musics like Marble Zone, Labyrinth, etc. are not really as good or catchy as Green Hill Zone in my book. However, I'm not saying those tracks are bad, just that they are not as good and kind of generic. But the game still makes good use of the Genesis sound chip. And there are other catchy tracks as well, as Starlight Zone, Spring Yard Zone, and Scrap Brain Zone, of which are probably the best tracks in this game, at least in my book. Overall, the soundtracks in this game is solid for its worth. Not especially great, but for what it does just fine. Though the series has largely and naturally improved from here, with even greater soundtracks to come in the Sonic franchise. Now that we got all the music, graphics, story stuff out of the way, let's finally get into the most important thing in games: the gameplay. Sonic the Hedgehog, as you may already know, is a blue fast-running hedgehog. He can run through loops, jump on platforms. It's fairly standard for a platformer, and especially for a platformer of its time. Sonic, unlike Mario, is more fast-paced in terms of gameplay. Sonic controls more loosely than Mario, and his stage design is for the most part based around speed, because they had a speedy character in mind, of which is no other than Sonic, of course. Around the game, the badniks are placed around, of which you can jump on or roll on to free the animal inside. It's kind of fun bouncing from enemy to enemy to reach as much of a high score as possible. I don't know for sure, but just something about the core idea of running as a fast hedgehog and bouncing around on enemies just feels so satisfying. Something that is worth noting is that certain badniks, of which are in the later levels in the game, you cannot jump on, as they prevent you from doing so, as those kind of badniks have spikes on their back. So you need to roll into them and not the other way around. This makes you needing to think rather than just rush through, and seeing as you have enough reacting times to see these kind of enemies, there is nothing wrong with it, as it's challenging due to good design most of the time. The camera gives you enough time to react to enemies like these most of the time, so there should not be much of a problem for you here. Throughout the game, there are also the rings. If you have no rings, one hit will send you off to hell. However, if you do at least have one ring on you, you can take unlimited damage. Just make sure that you always have at least one ring on you. This is a great mechanic, as for a fast-paced character like Sonic, who runs very fast and can run into shit easily, it's understandable why they did not go with the one-hit knockout mechanic, as that would just have made the game too cheap and frustrating. But that is not the case here. The game is for most of the time reasonably fair and tries to not make a punching bag out of you. If you die many times, you most likely just suck at the game, though we will get to the game's difficulty later. Because let's not forget the power-ups, of which are throughout the game. There are these object icons, of which represents an ability you get when you bounce on the box itself. For example, the box with the rings gives you 10 rings once you have bounced or rolled into it. Now, that was just an example, but that is just one out of the 4 power-ups of which are in the game. The second one is the shield power-up, of which gives you access to having a shield. When having this shield and later getting damage, after the first hit, in other words, after the shield has vanished, you will not drop all your rings all over the place as you usually would have. That is because the shield prevented you from doing so. I think this shield is a real nice addition, especially to games like these, as it comes very useful in certain situations. The third power-up is the invincibility power-up. It makes you invincible for a time limit. Then finally is the 1-up power-up, the one with the small Sonic icon on it. This power-up gives you a 1-up, in other words, an extra life. All these power-ups are a nice addition to this game, and to the Sonic franchise as well, as these power-ups were used from time to time again in future titles in the Sonic series. All these power-ups can be very useful to certain situations, and I'm glad that Yuji Naka programmed in those really useful and iconic power-ups. Now, as I promised before, I would discuss about the difficulty in this game. At first, in Green Hill Zone, of which is based mostly around speed, the game seems rather easy. It's a blast to run through these loops and such. As you progress, the platforming gets heavier and heavier in the game. Marble Zone and Labyrinth are probably one of the most difficult zones in the game, because in these zones you need to slow down to platform about and avoid dying from hazards and such. This is not just in Sonic games. This happens in all games in general. The more you progress, the heavier and tighter the platforming gets. This is natural for a platformer. Sonic's gameplay is a matter of how well you maintain the speed of Sonic. You need to know when to make use of Sonic speed and when not to. You can't just go fast whenever you want, especially not when the platforming is very enclosed. You need to know when to go fast and when not to, and in certain cases in the game you could pass certain sections real fast, of which you could not have passed as fast as on your first playthrough. Sonic is like a strategy game in a way. You need to repeat playing through these stages many times before you can master the stages, to remember all the layout of everything, etc., and to make use of it as much as possible to try to go as fast as possible. Platform in perfect timing, etc. This, to me, is just a great concept, as it gives Sonic a ton of replay values. I also just loves it how Sonic's momentum is handled in these games. When you run up hills, if you did not gather enough speed from before, will lead you to going slower. But you would have gone faster if you built up even bigger speed before running up that hill. Or like when you make a great position before rolling downhill, a slope will make you even faster than you would have went in a normal play. The momentum in Sonic's gameplay just feels so fluid, natural, and right. It does not feel stiff or slippery. It's very well handled and thought through well. And most importantly, programmed well, thanks to Yuji Naka. So it's more about when Sonic jumps rather than where he jumps in the classics, which I love a lot. The boss battles are really fun, challenging, fun, and easy to understand. And jumping on Robotnik's mobile feels very satisfying. And the fact that the bosses are challenging makes it all the more satisfying. I may be one of the few to say this, but I honestly do not find Labyrinth Zone too frustrating, at least with the US version. The Europe version is slower paced. When Sonic goes in the water, and because he can't swim he runs under it, he goes even twice as slow, if not even more, than his actual speed would have been if he had been on the surface. I don't mind Labyrinth Zone that much. Honestly, I feel that it's a nice change of pace. I like platforming about it, and getting to the air bubbles is not that hard or cheap at all. It's a matter of being skilled enough to pass the stage. Not mostly about the poor design of which the game is considered to have for the majority of the time, of which I disagree with. The game may be sometimes challenging due to poor design. Sometimes there are instant deaths with bottomless pits randomly appearing after a certain section you went incredibly fast from. Certain platform traps in labyrinths sending you off to a spike death before the camera even shows you the trap itself, and other stuff like that. The enemy placement can also be cheap at times. For the most part, I don't find these flaws too major, which can prevent the game from being good though. As someone legendary said once, you need to take the good with the bad. These flaws are not too major. These certainly don't make the game unplayable, and it just all works perfectly fine. And those flaws are quite minor compared to the game's strongest points and highlights. At the end of the day, if a game's positives outshines the negatives, the game should just end up being just fine. At the end of the day, there's no such thing as a perfect game. Sonic 1, for what it's worth, is a damn solid game. And I believe that any platform fan should give this game a shot if you like the core idea of playing a fast-paced platformer. It's worth noting that I grew up with this game and Sonic 2, and those two were my first Sonic games, and they are also the first Sonic games in the franchise in general. And even despite that, I'm not nostalgia blindfolded by it and can still see the flaws in those games. Unlike certain people who I like to refer as classic Sonic fanboys, who treats these games like they are perfect. And the other newer games in the Sonic franchise, like Sonic Lost World and Colors, are not good games because they are not the classics and therefore they are not quote-unquote perfect, meaning they are not quote-unquote good. That is not how fair game judgment works at all. So if minor flaws from the current Sonic games, like Lost World, cannot be accepted, then why does people not shit on the classics? It's a sad double standard, which is probably why Sega, as of writing, has been trying to bring back classic Sonic like gameplay, when it's not necessary at all. I don't mind the idea, but it playing like the classic is not necessary for it to be good. I would in fact argue that my first playthrough of this game as a kid was less pleasant than I experienced it now. As a kid, I loved the game with Green Hill Zone, but as soon as Marble Zone showed up, I found the game to be very mediocre, so I gave up on the game easily and jumped over to Sonic 2 and played that game instead way more. So I did not have the chance to beat Sonic 1 as a kid, nor Sonic 2. But as of recently I have, and Sonic 1 I can say safely is way better than I remembered it. The problems I had with this game were mostly just over exaggeration. Or just not problems to perfectly begin with. See, sometimes you can be blindly hateful towards a game as a kid. I in fact question myself nowadays why I used to hate Marble Zone so much. Sure, it's slower paced, but it's not unplayable, and it sure as hell is not the worst thing ever. And I would know this after I had come across truly bad design in games, of which you could classify as bad. So I have grown to like this game even more, and appreciate it more, after I have seen the real shitstorm of what bad design games can truly offer. So, before I end this review, let's talk about the special stages real quick. In order to access to them, you need to collect at least 50 rings without getting hit. Go to the goal and jump inside of the big golden ring, of which is a method I find to be quite frustrating, as unless you don't have 50 rings, you won't be able to access to those special stages. And you don't get unlimited tries either. If you have not won in a certain amount of special stages, in a special amount of time, you're not to 100% the game, which you do by winning and beating all the special stages. This is why I'm not a big fan of this method. The special stages are not that fun either, as you bounce around this dreamlike world and just try to avoid hazards, which gives you an instant failure if you touch it in the slightest. And I would not have minded this by much if it would not have been for that the camera bounced around back and forth. It's by no means unplayable, but several times it can be, so there are tons of trial and error to beat those stages, which is not a good thing. And that quote-unquote extra ending the game gives you if you have beat all 6 special stages to gather the 6 Chaos Emeralds is not even worth any of your time. It just adds that little of an image, and that image alone, considering all the struggle I went to get to see it, it was just not worth it. So I did not beat the special stages, as I could not even bother. They are not that bad. Also, far from the worst thing ever in gaming, just kind of mediocre. Other word, just passable. Not good, nor is it bad. If I could give the special stages credits to some extent, is that the concept of crushing through crystals in a dreamlike world as Sonic, of which is formed into a ball during this time, sounds pretty cool on paper. It's just how the idea was polished that is off. The dream-like background, calm music also is a nice touch. Maybe it's nostalgia, but it's just that I kind of like it a lot because it makes you feel like you're playing a different game. Considering that those special stages are representing a different world, it was probably attention for them to make it look so different from the main game. And for what they were going for they did, passable, if speaking overall. So the special stages are not worth your time, trust me, you're not missing out on much. Unless you love those special stages, that is good for you. They are just not for me. But then again, if you do love them, go ahead and beat them. You just need a very specific taste to enjoy those special stages. Just saying. Overall, Sonic 1, as I said 100 times before, is a good game. And you should check it out. Next time we are looking at Sonic 2. Thank you guys for watching this review. It means a lot, and I may continue this marathon at least until Generation. Take care guys, and see you later.